Hey everybody, happy Friday. Um, Today is clue 3 of my 2024 Mystery Shawl. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to go through the clue and talk about the techniques in there, a little bit about the charts that are in there, and there are no spoilers today. So I'll be demonstrating things on a swatch and not on the actual shawl itself or anything that even looks remotely like the shawl. So don't worry. It's nice to see you all in the comments. Yay. So nice to see you. So here I saw that it's raining in Pennsylvania. It's finally sunny here. I'm so excited because like a few days ago we had a blizzard. So it's really nice. I'm really happy to see spring, and I'm looking out the window at some beautiful blue sky, although it's still kind of chilly. So I hope everybody is enjoying your weather there too. I love how many people we have from all over. Yay! And I love to see you in the comments. So thank you so much. For anybody who doesn't know, this is a 2024 Mystery Shawl. I am Romi Hill, and I am the designer behind Designs by Romi. And you may also know me as Rosemary Hill. I did actually write a book as Rosemary Hill. So that's like fun fact why I decided to usually call myself Rosemary in parentheses Romy Hill because I have a book under both names. So yay. So okay, so I see there's a question from Kelly who says, I think I'm in trouble after the first of charts in Clue 2. I only have 1.6 ounces of C1 left. Um, yeah, that's not very much left. So you should definitely have more than that of C1 left. Even though most of the rest of the shawl now is C2, you are going to need your C1. So it sounds like you maybe have like a looser gauge. So if that's the case, and I will actually talk about that, like how to gauge how much yarn you're going to need to use for everything, and then also what to do if you feel like you're running short. So I can tell you that that the next instance of C1 could actually be a different color. So if you find a different color that you really like that would go with your other two colors, you could actually use that instead. So I think you should be fine. So let's see if there's any other questions here. Okay, so let's just take like a quick look through my through the clue and see if I answer any of your questions before you ask them. Okay, let me just go over here to my hands. Alrighty, so um, today is clue 3, and it mostly uses color 2. So there is some color 1 in chart D here, and but most of this clue is going to be worked in color 2. So you can see this like little area right here. So you're going to just look at this as sort of a synopsis, like what's happening here, and then as before, you're going to go to the charts and use those from here. So you have different choices as to what kind of chart to use. Okay, so I did actually add a little note up here just in case anybody was confused. I did get a question about this. So this is just a little note about C1 squares and C2 squares and how they're used for counting purposes on the charts. Okay, so let's go over here. Alrighty. So this is basically, this is something you have seen before. So those of you who might be running low on yarn, so you could actually substitute another color right up here for C1 if you're running low. So that is not going to make your shawl look weird or anything like that. So if you find one that looks nice with the other two and you're running a little bit low, don't worry about that. Okay, so as before, I have this sectioned off into bits of 5 stitches from right to left, just as a counting aid. And as before also, we start out working this 18 times at the bottom here, and then it moves up to 20 up top, right up here. So this right now, this is a 14 stitch repeat right here. 14 stitch repeat, and this is the what you see is what you knit format of the chart. So it's going to be a visual representation of these written instructions down below. So you can choose one or the other, or you can choose to work basically the what you see is what you get chart, and this shows you what the front looks like after you have finished. So it's the front texture, and you can always tell what type of chart this is by taking a look at the key. So on this type of chart here, where you have to switch from front to back as far as what the symbols mean, you're going to see on the key that each of the symbols, or maybe not all of them, because some of these only appear on one side, so I did not bother confusing you all with that. So if the symbol appears on both sides, you'll see here that on right side, for instance, this means knit through the back loop, and on the wrong side, this means purl through the back loop. So make sure you always take a look at the key to make sure of what type of chart that you're working. So this is my, what you see is what you get. Basically, like it's just the same format as the other chart. Okay, so I had a couple of questions from people about chart E. And yes, there is no what you see is what you get chart for chart E, because this chart only shows the right side. So every single wrong side row is going to be worked like this. So just as these symbols show, you're going to knit one through the back loop 2 times, purl 2 stitches before the end, and then knit one through the back loop 2 times. So that's the only wrong side row. So I only have presented this once, and everybody knows how to work the wrong side. So you're just going to be working that wrong side in between each of these. So after each one of these through row 10, you'll be working that other chart, that wrong side chart. And you can check yourself here, row 2 and all other even numbered rows. You're going to knit one through the back loop 2 times, purl to 2 stitches before the end, and knit one through the back loop 2 times. Okay, so let me see. So Denise asked, does C1 end in this clue? No, it does not. So there is some C1 later on. And so I'm also going to talk a little bit about that too, because yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. So in this particular case, I showed you before how you're going to be carrying your yarn up the side for smaller stripes. So on the last clue, we had smaller stripes. For this, so what I like to do when there's a lot of area here is to make a loop, and then I'll start working with that color again instead of cutting it. So And we'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so say you are working with two colors here. Say I wanted to stick in another color. Let me see. Looking for little bits of yarn here. This looks really ugly, but yeah. So what if I decide, okay, I'm going to do a longer stripe of something. So if I'm working with this color, and I'm just going to do some short rows here to show you what I mean. So there aren't any short rows in the shawl, but I'm just doing a little tiny bit here to show you what I am talking about. So I like to call this a safety loop because I don't like to cut my yarn. And I may actually put out a little update to this clue, just a note in there that you don't have to cut the yarn and you can kind of look and make sure that you like what it looks like. So say I'm working a whole bunch of my color 2 here, and I know I'm going to use my color 1 later on, but I don't want to carry it up the side. So what I like to do is just make a loop on the side. So this is enough so that I can weave it in on both sides. So I just want to make sure, so however much yarn you need to weave in, so you can cut this in the middle and weave it in on both sides. And then when I go back to working with my original yarn, I'm just going to leave that loop right there and start working. So this is how I keep from cutting up my yarn because this is a mystery shawl. So sometimes you're going to look at it and say, oh my God, that's hideous. Like, I mean, for instance, if I chose these two colors, I don't really like the way they look together. So I could take a look at this after I have worked with a bunch of the C2 and then think, okay, well, I really don't like the way that looks. So I'm going to rip that out. So then I haven't cut my yarn here. So all I have to do is just rip this out and I am back to where I was. So I didn't cut it. I can just stick those stitches back on my needle and I'm all good again. I didn't cut any of this yarn. So now I still have my full skein of yarn and I can put that away for a different project. So then at the end is when I generally will cut that whole thing. Just I usually just block it with those loops intact. And then afterwards, I cut the loops and weave in the ends. So let me check. Let me check to see and make sure that I am getting all of my questions in here. Okay. Sue, you're so bad. Everybody has different tastes though. I mean, and I've actually seen some colors that I would never ever use together look amazing in a finished project. But if I don't like them, I don't want to knit with them. You know what I'm saying? I like those two colors by themselves. I just don't like them together. So I may admire somebody else's project, but it's not for me, and I totally get it. Um, I think that I think that it's two things, like enjoying what you're knitting and then being happy with what you end up with. So there you go. No, no, Sue, I love that you are being silly. That's awesome. So I did actually neglect to say if you have questions or anything like that, do definitely ask me in the comments and I will answer. And I'm kind of checking in there just to make sure that I am getting everybody's questions. But of course, as is usual, um, my Wi-Fi Like my internet is just not happy today. I think maybe because, Mr. Romi says it's because of all of the geomagnetic storms on the sun. They are disrupting communications. So I don't know, but every single time I go live, there's some weird thing happening with my Wi-Fi. So it might take a little bit longer because my software buffers. So there's a little bit more of a delay, but I totally will get your question. And um, don't like be shy or anything like that. Like if I miss you, just ask me again. Definitely we'll get that question. Okay, so I love purple and chartreuse together, by the way. I love chartreuse. Like that is one of my very favorite colors ever. So, and so is purple. So, okay. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about chart E, just a little bit more, and then I'm going to show you some strategies about yarn usage and how to tell like how things are going, and all sorts of little nitty-gritty type stuff. Okay, so you'll notice chart E jumps up to 44 time repeat, and that is because this chart has a narrower repeat. So whereas before we had that 14 stitch repeat, we now have an 8 stitch repeat. So this is how that happened. For each 8 stitch repeat, I took 7 stitches and made it into 8. So you can take a look here. There's a little make one right in the middle there. And that is going to sort of it's going to look a little bit like there's a yarn over. It's sort of looks a little like it's a faux yarn over. Hi, Carol. It's nice to see you. Carol and I used to be in a knitting group together in Sonoma County. So it's nice to see. Carol actually took my very first class that I ever taught, which is awesome. Okay, so this make one is going to look like there's a little yarn over here, but it's not actually. So that's going to look like there's a yarn over right at the bottom there, but it's not really a yarn over. So as you go up here, because I added that make one in here, I turned half of the 14 stitch repeat into an 8 stitch repeat. So 7 stitches into 8 stitches. And so this is now 8 stitches, which means that for the 14 stitch repeat, there are actually 2 stitches added into that. So 8 stitches from 7 stitches. So I think I saw a couple of questions here. So Brittany said, how much of color one should we have left after clue two? Half a skein, a third. I would say it's let's see, closer to a third, less than a third. Yeah, so no, about a third, I think, about a third of a skein. So it depends on your yardage, though. So there's not going to be huge, huge amounts of color one left. And then, so Nancy says, I have been twisting and bringing the unused yarn up the side. Is that okay with this chart D, or do you recommend a loop and weave in method? So I do actually recommend doing a loop. And that is because there's such a large span across here. Of course, it is always knitter's choice, but I think it's kind of a pain in the rear to bring it up the side without making it too tight. I'm sorry, the yarn's on this side, without making it too tight along here. So if you twist all the way up this, you run the risk of kind of tightening up that edge and not being able to block it out as much as usual. So I definitely do recommend looping it around and then coming back up here. So and I actually, now that I have said that, I think I am going to just make a note of that and send out a really quick little update just with that note. And let me see other questions. Okay. Yeah, Sue. So Sue said that much twisting may make the edges tighter. Absolutely. So that's the problem with so much twisting. So I do like to just do a loop on the side. I call it a safety loop, in case you want to like change the colors or something like that. You can still go back later and change the colors. Okay. Alrighty. So let's move a little bit here. Okay. Hang on just a sec. I literally cannot have a live these days without having a coughing fit. So, so this is a little yarn scale that I use. This one is from Amazon. It just comes in a little pouch here. I like to weigh my yarn just to make sure that I have enough left to use. So here is how I sometimes figure out if I have enough yarn. So what I'm going to do is turn it on. I've been using my other one lately. So this one is obviously out of batteries. So what I like to do is I'm just going to weigh my yarn. And then if I'm not sure how much it's going to take, I'm just going to work one repeat up to the top like that. And I kind of swatch it on the side of my shawl. So I will do a lifeline. I'll show you what that looks like. So I often do this to make sure that I'm really not running out of yarn. And I'm just going to put a lifeline all the way across here. Get this onto my cable. Going to stick this through. Get it all the way through. So some needles have a little hole at the base here too. And you can also stick it through the bottom and do a lifeline that way. But I just like to use a needle. So this is unwaxed dental floss. I learned the very hard way to use unwaxed dental floss because I left my knitting in a hot car once. It took a while. So now I'm just going to tie this into a knot. Through here. Okay, so now that I've done that, what I like to do is just take basically like this much of the chart. So I'm going to do the side here and one repeat. So if you want, you can just do that repeat. So for instance, you can just go in here and then go back and forth within the repeat to figure out how much yarn you're going to use in this area. And once, so you would weigh first, just work back and forth in one repeat. You don't need to use any short rows or anything like that. You're just going to turn and work back and forth. Once you're to the top, weigh your yarn again, figure out how much you used, and then multiply by 20 times to figure out how much this repeat is going to take then you can kind of like make a guess as to how much over here. So I like to overcompensate a little bit. So I would add an extra repeat for this amount of stitches to either side. So I would do 21 times the amount of yarn it takes in the middle here. So and I find that to be really pretty accurate. And I think it also will help like assuage your worries about um, running out of yarn. So once you're finished with that little repeat, you just want to rip back down to the lifeline here, and your stitches will be saved on there. You can just pick them back up on your needle, and you're good to go. Um, so I don't usually use lifelines, but they are very handy, I think, for lots of things. One of them being this particular method that I was just talking about. Um, I do that really often, works really, really well. So I definitely suggest if you're worried about yarn, that that is a good way to do it. So we did talk a little bit before also about how much C1 you will need. If you feel like you're running low, what you can also do is, if you only have a few rows like this or up here, you can figure out how much yarn is taken up by a couple of rows and then figure out how much more you're going to need after this. So I will say after this clue, you are going to need C1 again. So if you've already got very, very few yards of C1 left, then you're going to want to figure out a third color that will go nicely. And the way that this is designed, you will be able to add a third color. So yeah, so don't worry. It'll all be good and you will have an even cooler looking shawl. Okay. So one thing I do want to say, if you are going to put a lifeline in and you just want to put it in and just, just to make sure, couple things you want to remember. No mistakes under the lifeline. Make sure everything under the lifeline is correct. Make sure you mark in the chart where you put it, because you don't want to have to go back and try to figure out where it was that you stuck your lifeline. It's always easier to do it after a wrong side row in this particular chart, these charts, because all the wrong side rows on in this clue, they're all just straight pearls. There's no patterning on that side. So it's always going to be easier to pick your stitches back up if it goes through the loops after a wrong side row. If you have stitch markers on your needle, just put the lifeline right through the stitch markers. That's particularly important in something like this chart because you're going to be moving your markers every time there's a double decrease right next to the repeat line. So that means that your stitches are going to kind of migrate around. And if you want to put a lifeline in, you want to make sure that when you rip back, you know exactly where your stitch markers went. So stick your lifeline right through the stitch markers and then add more stitch markers on the next row. So what you're going to have is your lifeline with your stitch markers right spaced out along the lifeline. It will be in your fabric, and then you will have added others, and as you knit up, those are the ones that will move with you. But if you have to rip back because there's a mistake, you're going to have your original stitch marker placement. Once you're finished and you don't need that lifeline anymore, all you have to do is cut the lifeline and your stitch markers will fall out and you'll be totally fine. Let me see. Exactly. Sue said no and knows you only designed in two colors. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, and also people also love to use mini skein sets and three colors, one color, like, yeah, it's all good. Okay, so once you are finished with your lifeline, let me grab my little cutter here. Okay, I'm just going to cut this and I'm just going to show you. I have been talking about how to use a bobby pin for um, to help repair things on Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen that before. So let's just talk a little bit about that. Okay, so one question I got was, how do you pick up a yarn over if you've dropped it? Because that's like, it's kind of scary. So let's go over here. If you don't have a lifeline, let's go over here, take a look at, just in case you might have dropped a yarn over. So I am going to drop a yarn over. I'm just going to move this aside here so you can actually see this better. Okay. So what if you drop a yarn over like this and you see, oh no, like what do you do with that? Okay. So let's take a little bit of a look at how this is engineered. So if you take a look at these yarn overs, you're going to see that there's a twist here. That twist means that there's been a yarn over and it's been worked into. So all along here, you're trying to create these twists. And up here, you can see the beginning of that twist over at the side here. And that is a stitch worked into the yarn over. So if you drop one, it can look a little confusing. So for instance, you just have these two bars of yarn here, and you might just be tempted to lift up that top one, but you do not want to do that. What you want to do is you want to preserve this twist down below. So you're going to go under the second bar and up and over to make a stitch with that top one. So that's what it's going to look like. And you will know that you succeeded when you've gotten both of those pieces of yarn away from that twist here. So that looks all clean, just like this looks really clean. Okay, so now what if you're working along and you need to like work down and maybe rip something out, like a stitch or, just a stitch or something like that. So I like to use a bobby pin. And the reason I like to use that is that it keeps all of the yarn in order. So it's going to keep your bars of yarn in the correct order. So now if I wanted to rip down, I would know that my yarn is going to stay in the right orders for when I come back to work that back up. So let's go back again here and grab that. Okay, so I do want to show you what it looks like when you've done patterning on both sides. So if you see this after you have tried to fix something and it looks a little funky, this is wrong. So I just added a yarn over, basically an extra yarn over here. So let's take a look. So you see that single strand here of yarn in between this yarn over and that yarn over? That means that there are yarn overs on both sides of the fabric. So that is not what you want to see. You do not want to see yarn, you don't want to see a single strand like this. All of your yarn overs on this particular shawl They're all going to look like this. They're all going to have that twist in between. Okay, so let me see, just checking. Okay, to make sure. Alrighty. So I don't suggest if you need to rip back, I don't suggest like in lace like this, I don't suggest just ripping back one stitch unless it's like a stitch that doesn't have any decreases or increases around it, because you're going to find that um, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have a problem. So for those of you who are intrepid um, fixers of stuff, if you want to try ripping out a section to fix it, you need to rip out an entire repeat. So if there are any of you who want to try lace surgery or something like this is a class I teach, by the way, and I sometimes I teach it for Vogue or for other entities, and I also have shown this in I have a playlist, Learn to Knit Lace, on my YouTube channel, and this is one of the things I cover: how to fix your mistakes. So if you want to rip the whole repeat down, because then you're going to have the same number of stitches. Whereas if, for instance, if I wanted to rip down part of this, all these decreases and increases here are going to change my stitch count. So unless you want to be really frustrated, um, yeah, rip down one repeat, pin it out, and that way you're not going to cross any of your yarn overs in there. However, if you have a lifeline in and you don't feel comfortable with it, the best thing to do is to rip back. So if you do want to try it, do remember that if you do have a lifeline, you're good. I mean, if you make a mess of it, it's not a problem because you have a lifeline. So let me see. Looking at that. Yeah, Sue is talking about columns of yarn overs. And let me see if I'm going to demonstrate what Sue is talking about on this piece right here. Okay, so when you sometimes when you rip out bits of lace, it's going to be really hard to tell which side the yarn over is on. For instance, say I rip out this repeat here, I've got it pinned out and I'm going to work back. The reason that I pin it out is because when you have a yarn over right next to the side of the repeat, it's very hard to tell whether you need to add a yarn over or if you need to add the yarn over on the other side, especially when stitches are moving back and forth like this. So you can tell that there's a yarn over when you see a twist at the side. So it's going to twist like this, and it's going to look a little confusing. And it's super easy to grab the wrong strand because of that twist. But that is what Sue is talking about how it is difficult to figure out how to rip that yarn over. Um, this actually, I may sometime actually do a YouTube about that. But for this particular, that's like a 2 hour class. So, so don't worry about it. Yes, Brittany was saying the bobby pin thing might help fix the sock. Yes, the bobby pin is really helpful. It's also really helpful, for instance, if you have dropped a stitch or something like that, you can stick your bobby pin through there and just save your stitches. So super helpful also. Okay, so let me let's go over here. I'm gonna see if I can show you kind of what I mean. Okay, so let's just take this out. So you can see here how this twists around and it's kind of twisty over here too, and really hard to tell what's going on. So, I mean, I know, but when I first started knitting, this really confused me. That's a stitch into a yarn over, and when I first started knitting lace, that was incredibly confusing to me. So, so that is why I started pinning things out. And I do suggest that you pin things out and in a way that you absolutely cannot get the wrong strand. Okay, so here we go. And now I'm back over in this area here. Oops, I actually shouldn't have done that all the way up. So this is what makes it so difficult. It's those little yarn overs in there. Yarn overs make everything more difficult, but they're so pretty. Okay, and let's get that top one there. Okay, so now all I have left is I have to recreate my yarn over here. All right, there we go. So the good thing about bobby pins, even if you don't have them, is that you can get them anywhere, like Walgreens, wherever. Amazon has them too. If you were in my in-person class, I always take a bunch of them with me in case anybody needs one. So if you take a class with me, I'll probably have bobby pins on me. Okay, let me see. I am going to go through here and check and make sure that I didn't miss anything. So does anybody have any other questions? Um, usually as the mystery goes along, there are fewer and fewer questions because it tends to be sort of top heavy up front with like all of the, getting used to how the pattern looks and how the charts are read and everything. So yes, Sue was saying they sell them in huge amounts to share for sure. Okay, okay. So, and Brittany was saying that they use a DPN to do surgery. I usually do too. I use the DPN or I will put it on a bobby pin. Bobby pins are so useful because the stitches don't fall off. So, yeah, so I will put stitches on a bobby pin and work them off of the bobby pin onto double pointed needles also. So that's always good too. Okay. Alrighty. So unless there are other questions, I am going to end this a little early today, even though I know Heather, you just got here and I'm about to sign off. Um, so before I do though, did you have any questions? Um, just in case. So Heather from Colorado, just in case you had a question that you wanted me to answer live that I haven't already answered. So anyway, there's actually another Zoom tomorrow. So that's at 1 p.m. Pacific. And if you've registered for Zooms in the past, you will get a reminder of that, and you don't have to register again. And then there's going to be another Zoom next Saturday. Then I'm gonna skip a Zoom over Memorial Day weekend because lots of people are out of town, including me, because I'll be teaching in Pennsylvania. And so no Zoom then, but then there will be a Zoom later on. So like after the final clue, there's going to be um, there's going to be a Zoom a couple of weeks later, and then everybody can come and you can all show off your pretties. And then let's see, anyone have any other questions? So Marilee says, can you briefly say what the updates to the clue were? So there's only one thing that I want to update. I'm just going to make a note in there to do a little loop of yarn instead of carry the yarn up the side. That was the only thing that I was going to update. So that is in, let me go over. That is in chart D. So I don't want anybody to be twisting all the way up here because it's going to be very hard to block it out. Um, so I'm going to make a note to make a loop of C1 here, enough so that you can weave in both ends. And that way you can see how your colors look, make sure everything is okay. If you don't like the colors together, you can always rip that part out or something, and you'll still have the yarn attached, so you won't have little pieces of skein. So that was the only thing I was going to say. Oh, for clue two. For clue two, there was, let's see, the update was that I somehow messed up and got the what you see is what you knit chart into the what you see is what you get box as well. So I fixed that. So yeah. And let me see. That is all. Yeah, so that's all that I recall as far as the updates for that. And then I also described it in my little update email that went out with the links. So you'll be able to look at that and see what it was that I updated. And let me see. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so yeah, thank you for joining me, everybody. And I hope that you can join me tomorrow. Um, if not, maybe another weekend would be good. I always love to see you and catch up, and I'd love to see you in the comments. So thank you so much for joining me. As always, the best place to look for support and for other people who are working on the same thing and might be able to answer your questions really quick is in my Ravelry group. And so they're like the fastest. And like, especially when there are lots of people all knitting together. So if you have an immediate question, that's always the best place to go first. And then I'm also available around social media and Facebook, Ravelry, YouTube, Instagram. So, or you can join me on the Zoom tomorrow. So, take care, everybody. It was lovely seeing you, and I will be live again next week. Bye bye.